It's the Devy Digest powered by League Winners. I'm Andy, and we're talking Senior Bowl recap. And I have a guest today who was there. We'll cover all this and more after the intro. What is going on, everyone? We are talking Senior Bowl recap today. We got guys who have risen, fallen throughout the entire process, and we have a guy who was actually there in Mobile. I am joined by Michael Anthony. Michael, what's going on, man?
Not much. What's going on with you? That I need to get more creative because that opening intro you got is pretty sick. So that's awesome.
I appreciate it, man. Now, before we get into the body of the show here, tell everyone listening and watching about yourself and how you got into content creation.
Okay, so about a year ago, maybe a little over a year and a half ago, or closer to a year and a half ago, Rich and I, my co-host, started a Philly and wrestling podcast. So we talk all Philly sports, sports in general, and wrestling. And during that, I kept trying to throw dynasty conversation in there, and it just was like it would kept getting bypassed because there was so much happening. And I was like, I feel like we need to start a different show just for dynasty content. And it just so happened Win Daily was looking for that kind of content, and it worked out. And since right after the draft, I want to say July, we've been doing the Dynasty Dogs for Win Daily, and that's been fun. Really enjoyed doing that.
Nice. That always sounds fun, getting into content creation and, just diving into things that you love to talk about. So that is awesome. And we'll talk more about your podcast later on. But let's go ahead and get into one quick hitter that we have today, and that is Cliff Kingsbury. He is officially the Commanders' offensive coordinator. What are your thoughts about that, Mike?
So originally he was supposed to be the OC for the Las Vegas Raiders, and then randomly, while during the Senior Bowl game, I got an alert saying he backed out of it. I was like, "Huh, that's strange." And then a day later, he gets the Commander's job. Something tells me that he really wants to be Caleb Williams' offensive coordinator. That's what it makes me think. I don't know about yourself.
I really don't know. Like what the Bears have been doing is very good. They're very secretive. They haven't really exposed anything. I've been of the mindset all along that the Bears should pay Justin Fields. He hasn't had anything around him. That defense is starting to shape up. DJ Moore is in his prime. You don't need to reset the quarterback window. Pay Justin Fields, trade that pick, get Marvin Harrison, team him up with DJ Moore, and then you have Cole Kmet in the middle, and it's all systems go for the Bears. So what I think the Bears have been trying to do is to create a trade market between the Commanders, the Patriots, and the Falcons, and whoever's going to blink first, the Bears will take that offer and trade down. So that's always been my thought. So, the Commanders, they do have, I think it's like 5 picks in the top 100.
Mm-hmm.
So they could use that to trade up one slot and get Caleb.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. I think I agree with you. I think the Bears should move back and get some more capital and some more help for Justin Fields, whether it be another wide receiver, offensive line help. I think that would be great. Something tells me the Commanders are moving up. If any team is going to do it, you mentioned the 5 picks in the first round. They obviously have more picks for next year, and I think the Bears could potentially get more than what they got for the Bryce Young pick last year with the Caleb Williams 101.
Yeah, and then that also has a trickle down effect to Drake May and Jaden Daniels, because say the Bears go to two, and if they get Marvin Harrison, do the foul or do the Cardinals then trade out of the what the fourth spot, and then
Yeah, fourth.
The Patriots will then have their choice of if they want May or if they want Daniels, and then do the Falcons make a big move? Do the Raiders make a move? Do the Vikings make a move? So it could set off a big trickle effect if the Bears do that. So I do think, draft night could be a crazy night, and it could be a fun night for everyone involved and everyone watching.
Do you think the 101 gets moved before draft night, or do you think that's a draft night move? Do you think, like you mentioned, you want to see who blinks first? Do you think they wait up until they're on the clock, or
I think I think the Commanders are so hell bent to make a splash. They failed with their head coaching search. I'm sure they wanted Ben Johnson as the guy. So it's like they're trying to make a splash with that new ownership. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do it beforehand so they can kind of, talk about those news in Washington and kind of, pump up the city, pump up the team. So it could be something that gets done early, but at the same time, with the Bears, they could say, okay, we do like your offer, but we quote unquote have other offers, and they could wait to see what the Patriots do. If Jay Daniels has a good pro day, if Drake May has a good pro day, what does that do for the Bears value with Caleb? Because everyone thinks Caleb is, the supreme, tier zero quarterback. He's in his own tier, and then it's a tear drop to Drake May, and then another tear drop to Daniels, or whatever the case might be. So I think there's a lot of variables involved. If Jaden Daniels has a great pro day, he could get elevated to maybe second, third, fourth overall. If Drake May is that guy that everyone thinks he is with that big arm and his mobility, he could be in that fight for that second quarterback spot. I just think I honestly think this race is a lot closer than people think. So
I
if
agree.
and if the Commanders offer a multitude of picks this year and next year combined, I wouldn't mind having them moving it down early, and then the Commanders will be on the clock, and then they can, kind of use their PR to promote whatever they want to promote about that overall pick.
Yeah, I there are some people that still think the Commanders should stick with Sam Howell,
No
and
chance.
I don't think there's a chance either. You mentioned the new ownership, the new coaching staff. They need to make things right in Washington. They need to right the ship. They need to right all the wrongs that they've had before. I don't know if you saw the thing circulating last week of the 2013 Commanders coaching staff. It
Oh
was
yeah,
Mike McDaniel, and all those guys. It was
yeah.
they need to they need to fix some things in Washington pretty majorly. But I agree with what you said. I think Drake May's closer to Caleb than people want to admit to right now.
Yeah, I think Drake May, he does have all the intangibles. He does have everything there. So he does have that chance to be, that next top quarterback that comes in. And, I think it was a few weeks ago, I did a sell episode where I said to sell Drake May. And it wasn't because he's not good. It's just because of rookie fever. You can get so
Mm-hmm.
much for Drake May. So, and then, talking about, cities doing their fans right, the Bears fan base, that ownership needs to do the city right. The city wants Justin Fields. Justin Fields has played out and he's played well. Yeah, I know he'll have his misses here and there, but if you reset the clock with Caleb and you're expecting Caleb Williams to have on platform, on rhythm throws, you haven't watched Caleb Williams. So
Right.
that's just my take on it. But let's go ahead and talk about Senior Bowl week. Now, you were actually on the ground in Mobile. So I will toss it over to you. We can break it down by the quarterbacks first. You were there live. give me your viewpoints on all these guys, and then I'll give you kind of my feedback on them after.
So I will say that my Philadelphia body was not ready for Mobile in January. It was hot, and the quarterback play wasn't necessarily that hot. Um, I think Michael Penix looked the best of the group. Spencer Rattler would probably be 1B or 2 in that conversation. And then Michael Pratt. Bo Nix struggled, like mightily struggled. I felt, I felt that all the quarterbacks had a lot of dump off passes, but I think Bo Nix was the leader in dump off passes the entire week. And the pressure was getting to him, and it's all simulated pressure. And he was just trying to get rid of that ball, which is great for watching these running backs, but you want to see him unload it. You want to see how he adapts to the pressure, and he didn't seem to do that very well.
Yeah, like that's always been his calling card at Oregon. If you take a look at these quarterbacks, you know, Nix has the lowest A dot, so that is what he does. Is he does a lot of dump offs, a lot of short area screens to Franklin, and then Troy Franklin, does create after the catch. So I do agree with that. When I was watching the practices on TV, I thought Spencer Rattler played the best out of all of
Okay.
them. I really liked what I saw with him. The question has never been his physical tools. He has a great arm. It's always been what's between the ears and how that is going to work out. So that's always been the question mark. I thought Michael Penix was okay. I've never been a Michael Penix guy, so
Mm,
I just thought he was okay. But I do agree with your assessment on Bo Nix. I just thought he looked rattled, even
he
though,
did.
like you said, it was simulated. He was like happy feet. His feet didn't. It wasn't set. He just felt like he was rushing everything, and the passes were short. I just didn't like it.
Yeah. So the first day, I will say Rattler probably had the worst day because he did the same thing Bo did all week essentially, and Michael Pratt, believe it or not, had the best day. His balls were on point and it looked great, and I was like, wow, okay, maybe he ends up elevating himself to like a late second round pick, maybe early third. And then he kind of just fell off a little bit, and I wouldn't call it a huge fall off because, like I mentioned before, I wasn't super impressed with any of the quarterback play. I do think, I mentioned Rattler being 1B, but I wasn't super impressed by him, even though he had some really nice throws. You could tell he was the vocal leader, upping guys, talking to guys, trying to rally the troops, which is great. But that first day was really ugly. And I do think it's kind of hard to judge quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl. To be fair, I think it's the hardest position to kind of adjust to a brand new system. You got a whole brand new offensive line, a mixed match of guys, brand new running backs, brand new wide receivers. So you literally have to like really stand out, and none of these guys really did that.
Yeah, when during the season, I was doing a Devy show with the Dynasty Pros, and
Mm.
I graded out Penix as a second rounder, and I graded out Nix as a fifth rounder. And I was seeing all these mocks of how Nix would go in the first, and I just never saw it. So what I saw at the Senior Bowl was the guy that I always thought he was. So I've always had a fifth round grade on him, which might be a little too low, but I really don't think any of these guys are going to go in the first round. I think maybe Penix goes in the second round, but I think the rest of these guys are probably third round or late. What's your opinion on that?
So I 100% agree with you. I did see Bo Nix getting mocked in the first round a lot to like the Saints, and I never really saw that either. I think there's a chance because the NFL being so quarterback hungry right now for multiple teams that Penix maybe sneaks into the back end of the first. Um, I think Bo is probably a second to third rounder. Again, it's not the talent like what I saw. I think the NFL needs quarterbacks. Like the Broncos, the Vikings, somebody's going to reach on whether we think these guys are fourth rounders or fifth rounders. The NFL always seems to try to grab these guys, even earlier than they're probably supposed to. And I think guys like Pratt's probably going to end up being a third rounder. Rattler, I think he elevated his stock enough to maybe late second, early third. We'll see, because there was a lot of hype on Rattler coming into college, and he just, unfortunately never lived up to it. There was that TV show or Netflix series that kind of put him in a bad light. And, in his defense, though, there were a lot of quarterbacks that came in and took his job that, we're talking about first round talents, Caleb Williams, Jalen Hurts, stuff like that. It's kind of hard to win that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we had our guy Nino Brown on a couple of weeks ago, and Spencer Rattler was his buy. And so he was trying to buy him before the Senior Bowl. So, that looks pretty good right now. Now, let's move
What
past.
What do you think Rattler goes? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Where do you think
I think he's probably mid to end of round 3 guy. I think he's a round 3 quarterback. The thing with him is he has all the tools. The ball just jumps out of his hands. The only thing is he doesn't have the confidence. He's been beat up so many times. At South Carolina, he had less than 2.5 seconds to throw the ball. So he has been so used to having a defender in his face. So he is someone that needs just needs confidence, needs maybe just a year to just settle down and relax. So if he can go to like the third round, go to like maybe the Falcons, and if the Falcons get like a stopgap quarterback for a year or two, Spencer Rattler could be a guy that sits, kind of forgets about his college past with all the pass rush in his face, and can kind of, elevate to what we have seen his potential to be ever since he was in high school. And so I know there's prospect fatigue with him, and people hear the name Spencer Rattler and they automatically, turn their heads because they've heard of him so many years. But at the end of the day, he has all the traits and all the tools to be in the NFL.
Can I give you my best possible landing spot for him? I think this would be a good one, either whether it's third or second or whatever round he goes. The Denver Broncos. I think Sean Payton would do wonders for a quarterback like Spencer Rattler. I think if they hold on to Russ for another year, again, you mentioned that stopgap quarterback, I think that would be perfect for him. And I kind of think he fits the mold of like a Russ or a Drew Brees kind of quarterback, smaller in stature, to have a live arm. I think that would be a good spot for him.
Yeah, that's a real good call. I mean, with the Broncos, they'll definitely need a quarterback. It's just a matter of when they take one, because there's always that thought, the top 3, are Caleb, May, and Daniels. Is there going to be a fourth quarterback that goes in the middle of the first round? Is it going to be JJ McCarthy? Is it going to be Michael Penix? There's always that thought. And for me, I've always been a JJ guy, and I got his jersey back there, so I am biased. I do a Michigan Wolverines podcast, so I am a little biased, but JJ makes all the throws. He has all the intangibles. He is someone that needs NFL coaching to kind of elevate him. So my preferred landing spot for JJ has always been the Vikings, where he can sit behind Kirk Cousins for a year. But if the Broncos decide they want JJ and get JJ and have him sit for a year, or like you were saying, Spencer Rattler, there are tons of teams that need a quarterback. The Raiders need a quarterback. It's going to be interesting to see if that fourth quarterback goes in the first round or not.
And I think it's gonna. I wouldn't be surprised if a fourth quarterback goes in the first round. And, it might be a little bit of a reach.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah. It's bound to happen. You know what I mean? Or we might end up getting a Will Levis situation like we did last year, like with the Titans, where they wanted to move up. I forget with who into the first round and couldn't get it done. And they still ended up with Levis at the 34th pick, I want to say it was. So we might end up getting something like that, where it's like the second pick in the second round or something like that.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Now let's go ahead and move off these quarterbacks that haven't, didn't really do well in the Senior Bowl. With these running backs, who impressed you the most, and then who conversely didn't impress you?
So I'm going to be 110% honest. I did not have the best intentions for the running backs going in. Like I thought it was not going to be great. And I was pleasantly surprised with how every running back looked, to be honest with you. I wasn't, I'm not really down on anybody, to be honest. I think they all exceeded my expectations, especially the running back, Dylan Labe. Is that how you say it? I keep
Yeah.
forgetting. From New Hampshire. New Hampshire is not the biggest school in the world. They don't really play a whole lot, but man, he was damn near uncoverable out of the backfield. And he was running routes, he was running fades, he was just there, he was beating everybody. He was a pleasant surprise. Marshawn Lloyd was the best running back of the week, in my opinion. His cuts were beautiful. Backfield work, catches out of the backfield was great. He had one run where he started bouncing it to the right, came back, made a cut, and went back to the left. And he ended up getting like 5 or 6 yards on the play. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not on his film yet if he ends up being a top 4 to 5 guy for me in the running back class. I liked him a lot. Ray Davis was was good, and the 5'8", 220, I think he
Yeah.
came in at, to move the way he does is impressive. He had a one-handed catch. I don't know if you saw that during the week as well. I have a few clips of him where his footwork and the way he was making defenders miss was great. And then Dejon Edwards from Georgia, a guy that I really didn't know anything about, to be honest with you. I was watching his cone drills, and he keeps his feet super close together, which is great. And he was an impressive riser for me, like a dark horse kind of running back. I don't think these guys are going to be like, how do I word this? Major fantasy contributors. I think there's a lot of very good football players, which is awesome. But I do think there are going to be guys that we're going to be able to plug and play for like a flex position. In the crunch, like Dylan Labe, Marshawn Lloyd, I think has the possibility to be like an RB2, 3 kind of vibe to him. And Ray Davis, he could be too, to be honest with you, just that size.
Yeah, I think with these running backs, I think with Marshawn Lloyd, he had his, I believe it was an ACL, and then Ray Davis had an ACL. So these are guys that are a little bit older, but they're also years removed from their ACL. So they're kind of getting their legs back under them. And with Dawan Edwards, as you were saying, he's a guy that he waited his turn at Georgia. He's always been efficient. He is someone who isn't afraid to run inside, has very good contact balance, shows good enough power for his weight. And he did one move, I think it was on day one during the 11-11, where he did a spin in back to the inside and then just ran it up the middle and no one touched him. So he does have that juice. He does have that spark. So I do like that. I did see Dylan Labe. He was doing wide receiver routes,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Now
that was awesome.
he's been I think it was reported that the Eagles met with him, and you're an Eagles fan. What would your thought be if they decided to move away from Swift and Penny and that back room? How would you feel with him being drafted?
So I would like that. I also saw that they met with Ray Davis as well. So either one of those guys I'd be very happy with. I do think they have a pass catcher or a primary pass catcher in Gainwell. I think Swift is gone. I think they're not going to pay him. So I think Ray Davis would be a good addition. But honestly, the way Dylan looked this week, I would be thrilled if they drafted him later on in the rounds. Even if they use him kind of like the Kenneth Gainwell way that they're using him, that would be great. I would be very happy with that. They met with a lot of people this week.
Yeah. Now, what was your thoughts on the entire receiving group? We had some guys who only practiced 2 days and bounced because they probably got word that they didn't need to do anything else, and then we had some guys who kind of struggled, who were on the bigger, more physical side that we kind of expected. What was your thought for the entire group, I guess? And if you want to break it down by each guy, let's go ahead and do it.
So I was relatively happy with the wide receiver group as a whole. Yeah, you mentioned the bigger, more physical guys. Xavier Legette really struggled the first day. Same with Johnny Wilson. The second day, they both looked significantly better. And then unfortunately, Wilson got hurt. I'm not exactly sure what his injury was. And Legette seemed to kind of tweak something as well. I noticed a knee wrap on him for like 2 days straight, and then he didn't practice day three. I think both of those guys hurt themselves a little bit in draft stock wise. Jamari Thrash from Louisville was somebody that I wasn't, super familiar with. I understood that he was a smaller, faster, twitchy wide receiver, and that was on full display this entire week. I think I was sending you videos of contested catches that he was making, which we obviously know that's not something in his Matt Forte. But see what I did there? But he really jumped out to me. He was pretty uncoverable for most of the week. He did have some drops, which again, that's on his profile as
Yeah.
well. But when he gets open, man, he makes it work, and he's got some major speed to him. He hit a few people with some double moves that I was like, damn, he's gone. You know what I mean? It's over. So he really jumped out to me. Who else? Tez Walker. I knew we were going to get to it eventually, so I might as well rip the Band-Aid off. Let's get to the positives first. Let's get those out of the way. I noticed, and I feel like a lot of people noticed, he was always going up against the best corner or whoever the best corner was on the field at that time, which is a good thing. You want that. You know what I mean? You want him to go up against the better guys, like the Kalen Kings, the Mitchell, I forget his first name, and Cam Hart from Notre Dame. He was going up against those guys pretty regularly. But he just was inconsistent in getting separation from these DBs. Now, when he did, he had like 4 to 5 steps on them, and that was impressive. But again, we talked about it, the drops, and that's not something that showed up on film. That's not something that's really in his background. But I was very surprised, and I was very surprised by the amount of drops he had during practices and during the game. And I feel like during the game, I think for whatever reason, I think he was just trying to overcompensate because he was going up one-handed a few times, try to elevate, try to make those flashy plays where people go, and he maybe didn't have the best week, but he really showed out in the Senior Bowl game. But he was a faller for me, unfortunately. I think those first round grades are no longer in the conversation. I think second round seems more feasible, back end. But he does have some talent, man. And when he gets by a guy, he gets a really good release. He has a really good swipe off the line against press man that I liked a lot. He's got to go to the right place.
Yeah, when I was watching the Senior Bowl game, I think it was in the fourth quarter when when Tez had already had a couple of bad drops, running thrown pass or whatever. When they were in the green zone, they were trying to draw plays up for him so that he would
I
kind of get
noticed
a
that.
touchdown, and then he still couldn't come down with this. So it's like he had a pretty bad week, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. The first round grade, I never saw it. The second round grade, I know that's where you land on him. I honestly don't think he's a second round grade anymore. Like
Mhm.
the The thing that surprised me the most was his hands.
Yeah,
What
that surprised me as well.
what we saw on tape is what transpired. We knew he wasn't a technical route runner. We knew he was going to win on vertical routes. I think someone asked him during the week about his weaknesses, and he even said it. It's his sloppy footwork. He rounds out his route, so he knows what he needs to improve, but he hasn't been able to do it. So we knew coming in those 101 drills, he wasn't going to win those, but we expected once the 11-11 hits that once it got him vertically, he would win that way, and he would win in the on day 3 practice with the end zone, that he would win that way. But what we saw is he would get the ball, or his hands would touch the ball, but he couldn't bring it in. It will get broken up. His hands just in
He
his
lacks
tape.
physicality.
Yeah, in his tape, we didn't see that in his tape where his hands were a weakness, where it wasn't strong. We saw him getting
Plucking balls
balls,
out of the
plucking
air.
them out of
Mhm.
the air. So it was a bad week for him. I just don't know anymore. I think he's more of a round 3 type guy.
I could see that. I just think he could still test extremely well. He is athletic. So I think there's still a realm of possibility where he could fall into the second round. The hands were a concern for me, but I'm trying not to let everything that I saw before this get blacked out by what I saw this week, because you mentioned it a couple times. This wasn't in, anything that we had seen before. Um, so it's concerning, but I'm trying hard not to let it fall, because he was my wide receiver 6 in the class. I will say he's much closer to 10 now, and I'm debating on whether if I want to put him completely out of the top 10 or have him like right in that 9-10 range. Because I do think the way he wins vertically is super impressive. And there's a lot of teams that need that, you know? So he's definitely a faller, but he's kind of a wait and see as well.
Now, one guy I want to ask you about before we get to the other guys that you want to talk about. What was your impression on Ricky Pearsall? I've done my article on him, and I'm in the process of putting it from pen to paper. I came away with the comp of Adam Thielen.
Hmm. I could see that. He's definitely somebody that knows how to get open, which is an Adam Thielen archetype. Obviously, he was done day 2, I
Yeah,
believe, correct?
yeah, he
So
left
he
day 2.
obviously impressed a lot of people and rose his stock enough to where they were like, "All right, you can rein it in a little bit." I did miss the first day of him because of just the plane ride, but everything that I had seen, from videos and stuff like that, he was, giving these DBs hell, which was impressive. Um, where do you think he lands? Like, where I know you said you wrote up an article. Where do you see him?
I think he has jumped up into round 3 discussion.
Yeah,
I really
I
do
could see
think that
that.
he really helped himself. When I watched his film all season, I was like, this guy has some traits. I just don't know how athletic he is. I wasn't 100% sure about that. And when I sat down and I watched film on him, watched the tape, I came away impressed. He's always the guy that finds a way to get open. He runs very smooth routes. Someone that just has a knack of winning. And what I like is I like these slot receivers that will sit down in an open area of a zone coverage to show his numbers to the quarterback, and then the quarterback knows where he is and isn't afraid. So I do think at the next level he's going to be that kind of a player, and I do think that type of like Adam Thielen archetype.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I do know a friend of mine interviewed him during the convention, and he oozes confidence, which is important. He, how do I put this? He definitely was one of the biggest risers of the week in the wide receiver room. For a wide receiver room that, everybody thought it was going to be Leggett. Everybody thought it was going to be Johnny Wilson. Ricky Pearsall, and I know a guy you're going to mention, you have to because you're a Michigan guy, Roman Wilson, probably had top 2 to 3, wide receiver weeks this week. And Ricky looked good, man. He did.
Now, Tez was a faller for you. Who are some risers for you during this Senior Bowl week?
So I'm gonna try to go off the two guys that didn't have to practice day 2, Roman and Pearsall. I think that's too easy, a little bit. Lad McConkey had a very impressive week. Again, a route running savant, very solid hands. One thing that I do think is a bit of a concern for him, the red zone.
Yeah.
When things get a little bit more physical, a little bit more, a little bit harder, he seems to struggle. Press man was a little bit of an issue for him with the more physical corners. I noticed that this week. But when you give him space, you're going to have some problems. And that's somebody the Eagles met with too twice this week. So that would be very good because we need that kind of slot wide receiver. So he was definitely a riser for me. I mentioned Jamari Thrash really rose for me as well. I think he could be in the 4th round discussion. When you think about it, probably before this, what would you think? Maybe 5th, 6th rounder?
Yeah, probably 6th rounder.
Yeah, so I think he rose his stock a little bit. Who am I missing? Oh, Javon Baker, who I met with this week. That, speaking of oozing confidence, man, he has like that all dog mentality to attacking the football in the air. I asked him who he models his game after, and he just straight up told me, I don't model my game after anybody. I'm myself. And I'm like, I like that. See, I like that kind of machismo a little bit. I will say he's a good route runner. I don't really like his comeback routes. I feel like he takes a little too many steps. I have a couple videos of, because they were running those comeback routes a lot. They were a little rounded, but he knows how to get open, and he knows how to use, his footwork and a little bit of physicality to get open. I don't think he's going to test well on the 40. I don't see a whole lot of speed there. I see burst, but I don't see speed. I don't see long speed in his game. He kind of reminds me of a George Pickens a little bit.
Yeah, with Baker, my only thing with him is he was at Alabama. He wasn't effective enough to be there, so he transferred down to UCF and he did what he was supposed to do. I think he's one of those receivers that will probably run maybe 4.55, maybe
Yeah, I
slower,
could see that.
maybe like a 4.6. So my thing is, if he can't create separation and his strength is his hands and doing contested catches, and I did see that clip when he's like, it's not a 50-50 ball, it's 100-0. I get that, but it's like at the next level, there are tons of other guys who are that same archetype who aren't the 4-4 guy who is taller, who's more physical, who can't separate, who has the strong hand. So that's been only my thing, and I know that we view him really differently. I view him as still as about a 6th rounder, if not maybe 5th as his ceiling. I know you have him a little higher. Now you were talking about your top 10 with Tez potentially falling out of your top 10. Did your next guy that you're going to talk about, and did Baker get into the bottom half of your top 10? But before you do that, talk about your final riser.
My final riser for the wide receiver position.
Yeah, the guy that can't run routes.
Come on, Malachi Corley. Listen, I actually thought his route running. I think his route running was pretty decent this week.
I
He
mean,
was.
he's someone that really can't run anything past 7 yards and
Mhm.
can't really track the ball. That's just his running back mentality, though.
I think I think he tracked the ball better this week than I think we've seen. And I was impressed. There was a couple, I wouldn't call them deep routes, but I would say, 20-ish yards where the ball was in the air and he came down with it. He had a contested catch that I could think of at least once or twice. So he was a definite riser for me. The physicality is definitely something that's like is scary how physical he is. Like sometimes I'm like, I look at him like, you need to calm down a little bit. Like that one play I sent you where he
Yeah.
just trucked the defender and it was an obvious PI. But I do think he was creating some separations like off the line, and I think that was missed a little bit by a few people.
Well, he was using that through physicality, not footwork. And with that play that you sent me, where he was like 7 yards deep and he just trucked the corner. My thing on that is, I get he's a physical guy, but if you're a GM or if you're a scout, come draft time, you're gonna sit down with him. You're gonna be like, what was your thought process on that? Because if that was a key 3rd and 2 and we call
Now
a
it's
play
third
for
and
you,
yeah.
yeah, that's gonna be a penalty, and then he's gonna be on the bench. So that's just my only thing. I get he's physical. I get he's got that dog in him. He's that former running back mentality. I get that, but I I I know you're not gonna like this comp, but my comp to him is LaVisca Chenault. He's someone that you're gonna have to scheme up for, and he is good enough to make a roster, but not good enough to see 20-25 snaps a game. I get he models his game after Debo, but he's more LaVisca Chenault.
So I've seen the Debo comp a million times, and I think that's a little unfair of a comparison because I mean, they play very similarly. Jesus, um, but Debo is a hard one to comp yourself to. If that makes sense. Like he's too good at what he does, and to be that way, you need to be that damn good, if that makes any sense. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I see what you're saying with Laviska Chenault, but I think he's a better route runner than Laviska
Is he?
Chenault was.
Is
I
he though?
think a little
Is he?
bit. Dude, I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it a little too hard in the physicality aspect, but I think if you go back and watch some of the videos from him this week, I know you did, but look at the footwork. I think it was better than he's given credit for.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always going to be his question mark. Like even come draft time, I think if he goes to the right opportunity, like the Dolphins or the Niners or even the Bengals, I would say, because
That's a
they're
good one.
potentially losing a couple of receivers. If he goes to a right spot where the offensive coordinator is inventive and youthful and smart, he can find a way to find success. But if he goes to like the Giants, or if he goes to the Jets, or if he goes to like, I don't know, Oakland or Vegas, if he goes to like a spot like that, I just don't see him working. I think he is really landing spot dependent.
Yeah, I can 50-50 agree with that. I think the Giants would be a horrible landing spot for him because they have a lot of the
They already have like
smaller.
8 slot
Yeah,
receivers.
they have. Yeah, exactly. 8 slot receivers, smaller guys. I think that would be horrible. I like the Bengals one that you mentioned. I think that's a decent spot. Um, I would really, I would like him in Philly. That's a little bit of a biased opinion, but the amount of times they run the wide receiver screen in here, I think he would benefit from that. Miami was another good one. I guess it really depends on what Tennessee does with DeAndre Hopkins. I think that would be another good spot for him. Will Levis being a good, we hope, a decent quarterback with Callahan as their new head coach. I think that could work. But Again, he is a bit landing spot dependent. I have seen him recently fall into a lot of people's top 50 draft picks. I don't know if that was I didn't notice it before the Senior Bowl, but I wonder if the Senior Bowl rose his stock to a top 50 pick. I'm not sure I'm there. I, I could say top 100 for sure, probably top 75, but I think top 50 is a little hefty.
Yeah, I don't think he's a top 50 pick. Did McConkey, did Corley, did Baker, did those three guys do enough to get into the latter half of your top 10 receivers?
So McConkey for sure has moved into my top 10. Corley was already in my top 10, so I think he was 8 or 9. I got to go back and look. So I would probably move him up one more spot with dropping Tez Walker a little bit. And then Javon Baker, as much as I like him, he is like right on that fringe. So I haven't really dove into my post Senior Bowl wide receiver rankings just yet. He's like right there, and it's going to be tough to keep him out for me, just with what I saw this week.
Now you're a Keon Coleman guy and you're a Javon Baker guy. Who are you higher on?
I want to say
Neither.
it's tough. I think I'm starting to be more of a Baker fan than Coleman. I'm
Okay.
starting to lean that way because as much as we think Keon Coleman is a good 50-50 ball receiver, I
I don't
think
think
big
that.
well, I mean that's what his yeah, I know you don't, but I know that's what a lot of people will say. I think Baker is substantially better at that than he is. Back to real quick, I wanted to touch on what you said about Baker transferring out of Alabama.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to go back and look at that 2020 Alabama wide receiver room. You know, he had Devontae Smith, he had Jalen Waddle, he had Mechie. There was no way, especially as a freshman, was he getting on the field at that point.
But at the same time, talent finds a way. Like we saw.
Not, I mean, you're talking Devontae Smith, who's a Heisman Trophy winner. You're talking Jalen Waddle, who was a first round wide receiver. Mechie kind of really just hasn't produced, but he was a great college wide receiver. That's tough.
I
That's tough to
mean,
beat out.
I
And then the next year, it was JMO. It was Mechie. I think we
if
forget how good those 2 years of Alabama wide receivers were.
but if Baker was that good, he would have transferred somewhere else better than
You
UCF.
see, I could
I
that
mean,
see that I could agree with.
no shade on UCF, but if he was that kind of a player, he would have ended up at like Oklahoma. He would end up at
Mhm.
LSU, one of these powerhouses. But instead, he went down to UCF.
See, I could agree with that. That I agree with. I think it probably would have helped him more to go to a better situation, like college wise. But I think we overlooked the fact on how damn good that Alabama room was at that point.
And at the same time, back then, the recruiting services were kind of off in a lot of their players and a lot of their, you know, skill sets and how they rated them back then. So I do think that it has improved over the year. I just with Javon Baker, I'm just not sold on the trait that will carry him to the NFL for NFL success. I think he's one of those guys that's going to be that rotational depth piece. He'll be like the fourth wide receiver, the fifth wide receiver, someone that kind of works in every once in a while. He's kind of like the Seahawks had a receiver like that. I think his last name was like Matthews or something. He was like a 6'3", 6'4" guy for the Seahawks. He was there during the Super Bowl against the Patriots.
Oh, I think. Mm-hmm.
Chris Matthews. Is it Chris Matthews? I'm Googling it. I think it was Chris Matthews. I think he's kind of like him, where he's going to go around from camp to camp to camp, and then he could have a hot streak for a short while because he is taller, and if he matches up against shorter DBs, he can do well that way. but kind of like Chris Matthews, if it is Chris Matthews, he'll have that short burst, and then defenses will figure him out, and then he'll be out of the league in a few years.
I could see him being more of a wide receiver 3 than a 4. Like I feel like on Miami.
Do you see him being a slot then, like a big slot?
He could. I think there's a possibility. I think
I don't think he's twitchy enough to be.
I was gonna say I feel like he's more of a Z than a slot or an X. But I think Miami would be a good spot for him, with Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I think they need a bigger body presence, like the 50-50 ball receiver. I would like him there. I feel like we always do this as like fantasy dynasty Devy people. We always end up putting these players in like the best case scenario spots. Like we'll say the Bills, the Dolphins, the Chiefs. I don't think the Chiefs would be a good one for him because of him and Rashee Rice are kind of like, I wouldn't say super similar, but I think they're too close to each other. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. But I think Miami would be a really good spot for him in like the 3rd round.
Now, with the tight ends of this group, who impressed you the most for these tight ends?
So Jaheim Bell, the Florida State tight end, definitely stood out from athletic standpoint because he was just getting open. The drops though with him were noticeable, and I feel like that's a very Florida State thing right now is drops for whatever reason. And he's undersized. Like I knew that coming in, but I'm like in that 6'1", 6'2" range. And if I'm like your size, there's, it's a little bit of a question mark. Brevin Ford, the Minnesota tight end, I think he can play a little bit. That was somebody that I didn't really know too much about. He's a physical presence. He isn't super athletic. Like he's not going to beat you with any kind of like double moves or anything like that. But I'm trying to think of a good NFL kind of comparison for him. Not super athletic, but can get you the ball when you need it to. You know what I mean? I've been trying to do that for the past couple of days, and I just can't put a person on it. I don't want to say this because it's like really high up, but Jason Witten wasn't the most athletically gifted tight end. You know what I mean? But he was physical. He could catch the ball. And I noticed that with Ford this week. The tight end from TCU is what is that? That is
Jared Wiley.
Yeah. That dude, I blanked on his name. A physical specimen, man. He is pretty damn athletic himself. He is probably what the NFL wants in their tight ends.
Yeah, and then one guy I keep bouncing back and forth with is Kansas State tight end Ben Sinnott.
Yeah,
he's someone. Nice he's someone that when watching his tape, I like him. And then I watched day one. He kind of struggled day one. Had some drops. Had some, I wouldn't say bad routes, but just the routes weren't crisp. And I know he did better day 2 and day 3. And I just like his versatility. He's one of those guys that's going to be that H-backy type that will do everything, that can play tight end, is physical enough, can also line up as fullback. You can probably detach him from the line. He's someone that's also a good blocker too. So these teams that want their tight ends to block, I think they're going to look at him, and whatever he brings in the receiving game is a plus.
I believe it or not, now that you mentioned it, I feel like I saw a lot of tight ends dropping the football this week. AJ Barner from Michigan.
He dropped a bunch.
Yeah, he dropped a bunch. Theo Johnson dropped a few, but he looked good. Bell, I already mentioned it, dropped a bunch. Ford dropped a few. It was, believe it or not, the running back. Now that I'm playing it back in my mind, I don't know how this happened, but I feel like the running backs were much better pass catchers than the tight ends were.
Yeah, and now we talked about the position. You're saying something about your flight. Tell me about your overall experience in Mobile from your 2 a.m. wake up call, leaving Philly, heading down to Mobile and everything.
And then my 2 a.m. wake up call to go back. Yeah. I would definitely, the one thing I would definitely plan my travel arrangements a little bit better. But I will say, if you love football, if you love talking fantasy, if you love talking dynasty, if you love talking Devy, if you are just a football head, you need to get down to Mobile. Jim Nagy runs an absolutely pristine um, week. I thought it was probably some of the most fun I've had, even just not even as a content creator. I I would 110,000 million, whatever number you want to say, recommend it to everybody who would be interested in doing something like that.
What was the best thing you ate all week?
So I went to this place called Bay Barbecue in Mobile. It was the best ribs I have ever had in my life. And the gentleman said that the rules of the restaurant were you had to eat the dry rub without dipping it first because the sauce is on the side. And to be honest with you, I'm not a real dry rub person. I usually like the sauce on the ribs, but I barely dipped. That's how damn good this dry rub was. And I would 110% recommend that place to every single person who goes down to Mobile. Um, I had crawfish for the first time, which was very interesting, but that was also very good. I'm not the biggest fan of working for my food, and
Yeah.
that's definitely something you have to do with like crawfish and crabs and stuff like that. But that seasoning that they had on there, it was damn good.
And then for everyone that wants to know, from the airport to the stadium, approximately how many minutes?
So I drove from the airport to the stadium. It was 20 minutes from the Mobile airport. And the Mobile airport, I didn't realize was so small. It was like super easy to get in and out, which is awesome. But yeah, it was about 20 minutes from the airport, and it was 15 minutes away from my hotel.
And you were saying the pretty much the entire city was prepping for this weekend, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that when I landed and I went to get my rental car, I think I told you this. Um, I was at the Alamo rental car section, and then there was down the thing there was Enterprise. And I kept hearing people go up to the Enterprise lady and was like, do you have any cars available to rent? And the lady would go, we don't have any cars. It's a Senior Bowl week. It's a Senior Bowl week. We have no cars. It's like, damn. And then I waited for like an hour for my car because they had to go find a car from elsewhere to bring to the airport. Um, I was supposed to get a compact car, like a regular sedan. I ended up with a Jeep Wrangler pickup truck thing.
Oh wow.
I was so confused because it's built like a Jeep. It has the little box and then it had a bed on the back. I was like, my brain didn't know how to like handle that. Like I just was like trying to do the math in my head. Why is it like this? But yeah, they the Senior Bowl definitely uh, brings a lot of um, like customers and um, fandom to the Mobile area, and I think it does a great job for that city.
Yeah, I think if anybody that does content creation, whether it be Devy, Dynasty, CFF, C2C stuff, I think it is a great time to go down there and meet up some other fellow content creators. You can create some content there, do some special pods where it's like three, four, five of you and just talk ball.
Mhm.
I know a lot of people they were hanging out at that one bar that you were saying. Like they hung
Beats, I
out
think it's
there.
called.
Yeah, they
Mhm.
hung out there after the practices. So it seems like everyone had a great time, and I've
You
seen
have
all
to
the
get down there.
pictures. Yeah, I'm that's probably something that I'm thinking about. Possibly doing next year or something. I know I got some special things in the works that I can't announce yet, but yeah, there are some things that I want to get done and doing the Senior Bowl thing and going down there and if you and Nino and all the other guys are going down there next year and stuff, it might be something to do, and it would be something fun, and get to watch these guys up close. Guys that we watch film on, guys that we've given our thoughts on, and get to see them up close and personal, getting to interview them and stuff like that. So yeah, it might be something that is on the bucket list for next year. So that was our recap of the Senior Bowl, but we're not done yet. At the Devy Digest, each week we give you a player profile. We give you a 2024 player profile to get you ready for your NFL rookie drafts. We do a CFF player profile of the day. For that gets you ready for your college football and C2C sub drafts, and then we get you a under the radar freshman to get you comfortable with these sub drafts coming up later on in the summer. The first guy that we are talking about, our Devy Digest player profile of the day, is North Carolina wide receiver Tez Walker. He's 6'1", 197 pounds, really good vertical route runner. He glides over the football field, good speed, had over 21.3 miles per hour at the Senior Bowl that was tracked. He had a tough week in Mobile. His hands aren't as strong as we saw on tape. Doesn't have the greatest footwork, not a technical route runner. My comp to him is Christian Watson at the next level. He's going to be a guy that run gassers, gets probably 4 targets a game for 2 catches for 50 yards, and then every once in a while gives you a 2 touchdown game to kind of blow up fantasy, but he'll probably be on your bench when he does that. Our CFF player of the day is Ole Miss running back Logan Diggs. He's 6'1", 215 pounds, began his career at Notre Dame, spent last year at LSU, and now he's at Ole Miss. Now, he should be the lead role here on the team that lost a lot of production from Quinshon Judkins leaving. The only issue that I have with him, besides being efficient for every year that he's been the main guy, he doesn't really have a passing profile. And my thing is, he knew he wasn't going to be the starter at LSU next year with Caleb Jackson emerging, so he left. He goes to a third program at Ole Miss. At Ole Miss, someone that I really do like in that running back room is Kedrick Riscano. He's someone that's going to eat into Logan Diggs' workload, but Logan Diggs has all the potential to be a very good fantasy asset for your CFF team. Now, our under the radar freshman profile of the day is North Texas wide receiver Jadon Smith. He is 6 feet, 172 pounds, a 3-star in the composites, as high as wide receiver 52 and as low as being unranked. He averages out to be a wide receiver 143. He's my wide receiver 66 for this class. What I like about him is he high points the ball, very good lateral movement, quick burst, play strength, very good contact balance. He tracks the ball really well, and he's also good on short area manufactured touches. He was everything for his high school team. North Texas, they lose their top 2 receivers, one to the transfer portal and one to graduation. He can carve out a role early on. He can kind of play that short intermediate area. He could possibly win one of the boundary positions. He is our under the radar freshman profile player of the day. Now, Mike, what are you currently working on?
So this is the first time I've been able to talk about the Senior Bowl. So this week, Rich and I, the podcast will be based a Senior Bowl recap. I'm going to keep pumping out the little mini rookie reports that I've been posting on X or on Twitter, whatever you want to call it nowadays. I'm going to keep working on those, try to get better, trying to learning from people like yourself. I really appreciate all the things, that you've taught me in the short time that we've known each other. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're working on, trying to build the podcast brand, trying to build, trying to get better at these rookie reports, stuff like that.
Tell the people where they can find your podcast, and what is your podcast called once again?
So we are the Dynasty Dogs. It is brought to you by Win Daily Sports. You can find myself at dynastydogmike on Twitter or X. You can find Rich, my co-host, at dynastydogrich on X. I almost did it again. So yeah, that's, on Spotify. We're mostly just on Spotify right now. We are on Apple now as well. that is something brand new. So I'm sorry that I kind of screwed that up there. But I really appreciate you having me on. This is my first time being a guest on someone's podcast, so I hope you don't lose any listeners during this time. So I appreciate you having
Nah,
me on.
I mean, I appreciate you hopping on, and that is a great podcast to listen to. I've been on that podcast. You know, Rich and Mike, they do a fantastic job. That is a podcast that you guys must listen to. So that is a very good show to do. Now, for everyone on X, once again, please follow Michael at dynastydogmike. Now, if you've enjoyed the show, below here is my schedule here. So for audio content, every Sunday and Wednesday, we do the Devy Digest show through League Winners. They air on Spotify and Apple every
When do you
Monday
breathe?
and Thursday. Don't really ever. Every Tuesday, we do the Welcome to the Big House through the CFB Nation. That airs a couple of days later on Spotify and Apple. For my written content, you can find that on through the League Winners. Every Monday, we do a 2024 Devy Digest player profile. Get you ready for your NFL rookie drafts. Every Friday, we do the Devy Digest Freshman Friday player profile to get you ready for all of these freshmen that are coming in so that you know exactly what to do for your C2C sub drafts and your Devy sub drafts. Every Wednesday and Saturday, we do content that's on Utah, Utah State, and BYU football. We're going to get you ready for spring camp, and we're going to bring some exclusive content behind the scenes. So we'll be back next time. But before we go, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and you can follow me at Andy_Pham1. And if you're listening on Spotify and Apple, give us a rate and review, and we'll see you next time on the Devy Digest.